to go home sick tonight, so I'll be standing in for him. We're just going to go ahead with questions, or
Why don't you give an overview, Fred, in terms of the accomplishments of what you guys have been doing, and then perhaps, since Gary's not here, we can all fill in terms of the building department and the successes of the building department this year.
okay. I definitely want to start off with the successes. We had a banger year. A lot of building going on in Mount Olive Township. Far exceeds what we were expecting. It's hard to judge. It's hard to forecast what the year is going to be like. Do the best we can, but years like we just had exceeds everyone's dreams. Actually, it was busy. We were constantly moving. I think we did close to $800,000 worth of permits. Just continue on the same line as far as manpower goes. We're not asking to add any inspectors or any clerical.
From a budgeting perspective, the township is allowed by state law to raise our revenue number to last year's revenues that were actually collected. I believe that we were probably how much over what we had budgeted for 2013? Whether it was $100,000 or $200,000 over what we had budgeted from the year before. The budget number this year is probably close to $100,000 less than we actually took in this year in terms of revenue that we're expecting for next year. And as we're going to hear from Jack later, Jack is going later? Yeah. The outlook in terms of where we're going with building revenue for the following year and maybe 2 or 3 years out is going to be hopefully increasing every year. So it really is a benefit to the township in terms of the effort that the small group of people who work back in the buildings department is doing on behalf of the township and the revenue that they're bringing in. And it makes our job in terms of putting the budget together much easier. Fred, why don't you talk about the shared service contract that you brought in this year with Hackettstown?
Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, if before we go on to any other subject, I just have a couple more questions, a few questions on the building.
Sure.
The nature of the permits that were this past year, was there anything different? Have you seen any pattern, anything strange out of the ordinary?
No, just new building. Toll Brothers, Horton.
Okay.
Just big projects.
All right.
The only thing which was slightly out of the ordinary was the building fees which came in with Siemens this year.
That was it. Thank you. Joe.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Having Horton take over that part of the Kaplan, that probably helped a lot. They started building up there again.
They did. They bought like 7 foundations, or I think 10 foundations from the existing.
Yeah.
And we just saw plans that they're going to put more in.
Yeah, yeah, so they're moving right along with that,
Yep.
which is good.
You also have to recognize that Morris Chase was moving along, Morris Hunt was moving along, you had Weiss Markets coming in, and you had Siemens. And all of the above added greatly to where the inspections were going. Next year and the years following, you have hopefully Marble Land Farms, you're going to have the Simoff property. So, as I said, we expect that the revenues from the building department are going to continue to increase, yet we've made the determination that we're not going to raise the limit in terms of our budgeting capacity to the revenues actually collected, because of, obviously, there are always contingencies, and some of them are not always in a positive fashion. So we think we've left them at a reasonable level rather than raise them to the maximum limit that we could have in terms of our budgeting process.
I actually have a question for Fred with I don't know if you know the answer to this. On the buildings, like for instance, in Marsh Chase, when, like I noticed that recently they've increased the price for their new construction on every single one of them, anywhere from 20 to 50,000. Their fee, is that charged, is that based on when they got their permits, or is that on the finished building? When they do the building?
You asking me why they raised their
No,
rate?
no, no, I know why they raised it, because
Oh.
they're anticipating a 3% increase in real estate in Mount Olive this year.
Okay.
But what I'm asking is, say if they originally, when they got the permit, and it was $100,000, just as an arbitrary number, and they raised it to 150, their fee that they pay for that building, is it based on what they were originally approved for, or
Yes.
what they sell for?
At the time when they submitted the...
Application?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering, because, like I said, I've noticed they have increased their listing price on
Right.
the new construction, which is a good thing.
Ultimately, the rateable, when it comes online,
Yeah.
goes on at the higher number.
Exactly.
Mr. Ferranti?
Yeah, I see we have 15,000 for the demolition of buildings along Route 46. Are these the buildings that are unkept
Yes,
right
sir.
now?
Yes.
Is there any in particular that we're looking at, or?
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
This has to do with, from 2 years ago, our efforts, again, we're running into the Highlands preservation problems, but we'd like to set aside, one of the frustrations we have had is when we've been able to move forward, we've had no mechanism within the budget to go ahead and clean it up and place a lien on the property. So again, we're hoping to keep that in reserve. We don't anticipate using any of it or all of it, but we'd like to have the wherewithal that if we have the opportunity and we feel it's a good investment, because we'll get the money back, because it's a viable property, that we can go ahead and clean it up and make it more commercially viable.
We look at two aspects with respect to dilapidated properties along Route 46, as well as the rest of the town. Number one, is it an unsafe structure? If it's an deemed to be an unsafe structure by our construction official, it gives us much greater latitude in terms of the way that we deal with the property owner. If we find properties that are not deemed unsafe structures but are not kept in the condition that we feel they should be kept in, we have the property maintenance code. So we're going at it from both angles as we are allowed by law. This escrow, or this amount of money which we put into the budget, will give us a little bit more leeway, and ultimately, if it's not used, it'll lapse back into surplus.
Mr. Amianda?
How many buildings are we talking about?
I think the original target was 6. Now, one's been rectified at Norwright and Sand Shore, so we're down to 5. Several of those are within the Highlands redevelopment zone, so we're taking that approach currently with conjunction with our planner and the planning board. So we'll see where that redevelopment takes us. And then there's a couple others outside of that zone. You know, I don't want to say a public meeting. One, it has problems with wetlands and some other areas, so we're a little reluctant to expend money in that regard.
We're also looking at different options in terms of some of the properties, and perhaps purchasing some of the properties to be used for, if we can find a economically viable use for the building, such as one property on 46, which has been pretty much in an unused state for ever since I've lived in town. It used to be a bar. We're going to look at that as an option and try and bring it back to some kind of economic viability. Benefits us all, that if the town starts to improve in terms of our property maintenance, everyone in town will benefit through that.
Mr. Bell?
I have a question with the, for the demolition, do we ever consider an option of maybe the fire departments coming and using it as a drill and then taking it down? Is that something we can do in some of these areas?
I'd probably have to get legal advice on that. If it was our property, certainly we could do it. The problem is there are other people's property. We've been trying to do it, you know, through an incentive-laden way to have them take it down. I haven't crossed that bridge yet. Not to say that we wouldn't. If we had a property owner that was willing to, you know, provide indemnification and with the requisite, you know, legal okay, that's an avenue I'd have to pursue.
I was just thinking in terms of a drill and
Such
combine.
as what happened at Siemens.
Yeah, it's like a good opportunity.
If-
Is that correct, Fred?
Yep.
It's a very good point. To the extent that we get to a property which we have agreement with the property owner to take down the property, I think it's worthwhile to contact the different departments to find out if they have an interest in pursuing a drill, and finding out from the property owner before the building's taken down whether or not
That
they
would
would
be
allow
good.
that. You obviously can't light a fire in the building.
Right.
You put
Yeah.
the smoke machines in and
Yeah.
move forward.
Obviously. Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Fred, is there any capital requests at all, or?
In the building side, I don't believe there are. I'm not seeing any.
Okay.
I don't remember any.
He told me this afternoon.
Yeah, the only thing that it might be is a vehicle, and I don't remember any request out of the construction office.
Okay. On to the OEM and fire.
Well, we'll start off with the fire prevention. As the mayor pointed out earlier, we entered into another shared service agreement with Hackstown. We're about almost 2 months into it already. It's keeping us busy. Not much flack from the business owners. Usually we get a lot of calls wondering why they have to answer to Mount Olive when they live in Hackstown. We did send out a letter, lessons learned from Chester when we took over Chester. We sent out a letter beforehand, so they should all know about it.
Any questions? Yes, Ms. LaBelle?
Just a question for code. I'm sure you heard on the news, there was a restaurant in New York City where they died from the carbon monoxide and they weren't required
That
in
is
commercial structures. How is that in our area? Is that required or is that
It is
optional?
not required.
It's not required?
No. I would venture a guess to say that soon it will be.
Yeah,
That's what happens with the Jersey Fire Code, someone's got to die.
Yep. So, and we couldn't be proactive about that, or Fred, would we wait?
You can make an ordinance.
Make it,
We could look into it on the local level to do that. I would just have to check with the state to make sure we're not crossing any lines. I don't see a problem if we were going
Just-
to do that.
I know they said that it's rather expensive for commercial buildings to do carbon monoxide detectors, and it's not like in the home, but on the other hand, you want to wait for somebody to die, and I would think it'd be nice if we were a little bit proactive on it instead of reactive.
I
So.
don't think it would be too much of a big deal. I mean, they already have a fire
And a lot
alarm
of,
system.
yeah, and a lot of them are electronic anyway, so I can't imagine, but, yeah, could we check into that?
Sure.
And see, because I think it's a good idea.
Do the schools have them? I know they said they didn't in
No.
Connecticut.
No, the schools-
either are
the s-
another. I mean, that's a
no.
different issue. We can't, well, maybe we
And that's-
could, because I couldn't believe the schools didn't have them.
That's a very
Of
good
all
point,
places.
The way the code is written now, they're protecting people while they're asleep,
Yeah, well,
and that's it.
But it can happen at any
as
time.
we saw.
If you get higher levels of CO, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
like we saw
knockout
in that
punch.
restaurant, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that, I would like to,
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get in touch with Fred a little bit to go over that.
thank you.
We could put something together for a future agenda.
Any other questions on the, Mr. Amianda?
How often do you update the fire systems in the 4 buildings, in the municipal buildings?
Update, or do we check them?
Update, make sure that the alarm system in here or in senior citizens or in the court system, they are coordinated.
Once a year. Once a year, we go out and we make sure that they have an outside company come in and test it. We don't test the systems, we just make sure that the tests are performed. And we do get a report from not only the township building, but schools, any commercial building in town. We do see the reports on that. Some have every 6 months. Some of them even have every quarter, based upon the use of the structure.
And you maintain the fire incident reports in the buildings?
The fire reports are maintained by the fire departments. We maintain the inspection reports.
Anything else? Anyone? Any capital requests there?
Fire marshal, I don't believe there is a vehicle.
Which one are you replacing?
The Durango,
The red one.
the red Durango. It's on its last legs.
Yeah. I heard it drive by a couple times. I don't think you're going to get an argument from me on that.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, and OEM, any questions for OEM?
Mr.
I
Rome?
see we got the Active 911. Can you give me a brief rundown what that is?
Active 911 is It's a web-based program that we currently, the fire departments use a different type of it. When there's a call, it gets sent out a text message. And then when they respond, they hit a button on their phone. Let's say there's a call at the municipal building for carbon monoxide. Each members can say, all right, I'm going, and it flashes up to the board. Now, the dispatch, the way we want to work it, the dispatchers will have a screen up there, and they'll be able to see what kind of response they have. The system that we have now, everyone's moving away from it, and they're going to this Active 911, which is what the county's using.
Now, this is going to allow for more accurate information and reports that are going to be easier to generate?
In the reports, no. As far as the response,
Okay.
if the dispatcher hasn't heard from anybody signing on from a fire truck,
Right.
instead of calling for the second town, they can look up real briefly and see that they've got 5 members coming. Maybe it's snowing out and their response is delayed,
Right, right.
so they don't have to push that extra button.
So
And also the officers at the firehouse, they also have boards. They can gauge their response by just looking up at this board.
I mean, basically, because I'd like to make sure that we have every year know the average response, especially during daytime and evening hours. And I know in the past you have to go through all the calls, if I'm correct. Now, and this,
I'm not sure if that's purgeable. If you can purge that information, I'm pretty sure you can.
okay. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Finances next. Sherry. That's section 8, if you're looking.
Just remember, I was going to bring my sewer payment and give it to Rose, and I forgot.
But we'll always take money, Colleen. not a
Yes.
problem.
I'll put it in the mail tomorrow.
I've got that phase reminds me.
I know, it's like, it was
They
right
see you
there.
and they just see like a big dollar sign, yeah.
And I was going to pay ahead, too. That's even better.
Jack growing a beard?
Yeah, trying to.
Will that get us more money, Rob? Anyway, our budget really is, our 3 budgets are really pretty straightforward. My budget, finance, actually went down $18,000 this year. The reason for that is we had the time and attendance system in last year's budget that obviously we don't need to put in again this year, so we've saved money on my budget. Rose's budget went up about $1,700. The reason for that is we have a new employee that started late last year that's going to be taking tax collection classes, so that money is for training. Jack's budget has remained the same. I think overall we figured out our budgets, our 3 budgets are about $62,000, which is probably obviously a de minimis amount of the overall budget. And the bulk really of our budget is for professional services. The bulk, at least half of it, is for tax appeal defense. I think, we have almost $30,000 in there for that. And printing and mailing of the tax bills we have in the budget as well. We're not asking for any new people. We're fine with what we have. We're sad to see Colleen go. We do have a replacement that started 3 months ago, so he's had a decent amount of time to start training with her, which is great. And we don't have any capital. And Colleen, you usually ask, is there anything that we want that we don't have in our budget? And the answer to that is no. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Ms. LaRocca.
For Jack, for the tax appeals, how are the tax appeals going? Are we, is it like average? Are we getting more, or?
Yeah, well, it's tough to answer that question at this time because
Right.
the deadline for 2014 is April 1st. But for last year, we had over 250,000 at the state level, 250 million at the state level, and we were able to settle about 200,000 of that. The rest of it, it's not unusual that state tax appeals go on for a number of years, but I would have to say that without a doubt, that was our best year in terms of success, in terms of getting rid of a lot of outstanding appeals with very little refund necessary. It was really de minimis. I think that out of those, the amount was about 30 appeals. We resolved about, say, 22 of them, and of those, only 2 got refunds. So it was a good year. You never know what's on the horizon.
Exactly. Well, I did notice that for the most part, when I look at the closed transactions and the tax assessment, we're like spot on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
really,
it's-
we don't, it's 15%, right, between market
Yeah,
value and assessed
15%
value?
leeway. Mhm.
And so that's like excellent, and judging from like other towns, it's not as close, I will tell you, it's nowhere near that close.
Right. Yeah.
So that, you're doing a great job. It's,
Well, then I'm going to have to say right back at you, because if you will, those of you who have been here, we had a revaluation in 2008, and I had to come back with my tail between my legs, so to speak, and say, the values are going down, we have to do a reassessment. We came back twice, and that second reassessment really put everything right on the button.
Right on the button.
And we're seeing it in the results of the tax appeals, because we're
Yeah.
really seeing very little givebacks.
And that's
So-
really, the reason why I brought that is, you're right, it's really important to know that, too, because basically it goes back to being proactive instead of reactive. Instead of having all these tax appeals and spending all that money, focusing our effort on trying to keep that ratio close, so we
Sure.
don't have all of those tax appeals. So I think
Right.
it's excellent. Thank
Well,
you.
Thanks for having the confidence in me when I recommended the reassessments.
Great. Perfect.
I think last year was definitely one of our best financial years in terms of our tax collection rate, our tax appeals.
Addeds.
The addeds, you know, the surplus figure, everything really lined up last year for us. I think we planned well. I think we, as usual, were conservative. It definitely helped us. So hopefully this year will be the same, if not better.
Yep.
Mr. Ramiano?
Do you expect expense side to exceed revenue side of the budget due to unexpected high expenses of snowfall, the snow that we had?
No, I mean, I have a list of adjustments that we have to make to the mayor's proposed budget. One of them is going to be for snow. We have to add money back for snow. So once we do that before we introduce the budget, we'll be okay.
And where is that money going to come from?
We have money probably that we'll use from surplus, since we wound up with such a large number. That's going to be my recommendation, that we take it from there.
So it won't be an increase, it's going to just be...
No, I'm not going to recommend that we increase taxes. I think we have enough money in surplus to be able to cover it. Rob may have a different opinion, but...
No, ultimately, at this point, it's the council's decision.
Yeah.
since
That's
my
true.
budget's come in, but
Yeah.
my recommendation is consistent with yours, is to take the additional monies out of surplus. What we're really budgeting for at this point are storms which haven't happened yet in November and December of this year. And to the extent that we don't expend the money that we've taken out of surplus, it will regenerate back into surplus. So that will avoid the possibility of having to go to some kind of emergency appropriation for snow removal. Or the money could lapse into a snow accumulated trust, as we've done in the past, to cover future events. But ultimately, because of the conservative approach that we've taken with the budget this year, leaving as much money in surplus as we possibly could for future years, it allows us, based upon this unforeseen contingency of extreme additional costs related to materials and overtime related to the snow removal, to be able to pass that along without any tax increase to the residents. So my suggestion is that I brought you a budget which has no increase, and I would hope that as the budget leaves this council, it also has no increase. And I think that we can do that very easily by simply using additional surplus to cover these additional costs.
I mean, we're in sort of a fortunate position, unlike other towns, in that we have the money in surplus to be able to tap into. I mean, there are other towns where they've got these snow costs and they don't know, you know, they're going to probably have to raise taxes to cover it, so.
Anyone else? Sean?
I just want to point out for council's benefit, and as part of the report I provided 2 weeks ago, don't forget, at the end of last year, that was attributed to 2013 with our snow removal efforts. We spent about $250,000 last year in snow response. Currently, this year, we're about $179,000, so we're still below last year. So even though this seems like a tremendously long and expensive season, which it has been, some of that was about 3 or 4 storms in late 2013. On a nice, on a positive note, on a good winter, 2012, we spent about $64,000. So they certainly fluctuate, but we're below last year's expenditures still.
Which is good. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to the courts, section 12.
Good evening.
Good evening. No support team tonight?
No, just me.
Sent you by yourself.
Overall, in looking at my budget, I'm not asking for increases in most of the line items. I'm asking for a small increase in printing and binding of $200 because of the expense of tickets. I'm also looking into increases in our professional association dues because I knew ahead of time that both the North Jersey Association and the State Court Administrators Association were going to be raising their dues, and our office does enroll all of the staff members in the two associations. The largest increase that I'm asking for is under legal services, and that would address our expenses for alternate public defenders. And in 2012, I had $1,850 budgeted. Because we went over in that line item in 2013, I had asked you to increase it to $2,600. I actually, using money from other line items, spent over $3,300 in that line item last year, and at the end of the year still had about $2,200 in expenses that I needed to encumber, couldn't because there just was no more give in my budget, so I held those cases over to this year. So I'm asking for that to be increased to $7,600, and that's the largest increase that I'm asking for. That's an expense that I don't have a lot of control over because these are people that are approved for the public defender, and either because there is a conflict between them and the public defender that precludes the public defender from representing them, or because you have cases where there are multiple defendants who are charged in the same case, and more than one of them are approved for the public defender, they can't be represented by the same attorney. So then I have to reach out and pay for an alternate for them. We have 3 different attorneys that are willing to represent them for the amount of money that the judge assesses as the public defender fee, which is up to $200. So they're sort of doing the town a favor by representing these clients. But I'm hoping that with this increase, we will be able to cover all the expenses without having to raid the other line items in the budget.
Questions? Mr. Roman?
Is this the first year that you can recall that something like that happening where you needed to farm out the public defender?
No, actually, since I took over in 2012, we've done it. There's just been a large increase in the number of alternates that are approved. There are a lot of people that are eligible for the public defender. We've increased the regular public defender, Mr. Arbori, to coming in twice a month instead of once. And each time he's listed, he has about 15 cases on each time. And in addition to that, we have all these other public defender cases that need alternate counsel.
You said that you needed funds for printing up tickets. I thought, were we going to electronic tickets or?
We looked into it, and right now, we're not going to do it because of the expense of it, but it's something that we'd like to do down the road. I know that I've spoken to the police department about, in both Mount Olive Township and in Netcon, about possibly sharing the expense with them. And I believe that some towns are looking into the alternative of using the county system.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I was speaking with the court administrator in Roxbury. Her municipality is going to go to that this year, so I'm very interested to see how that works for them and what the expenses are. And you still will have printing costs because you can't always use the electronic tickets.
Right.
Right now, the state police use electronic ticketing, and I would say maybe half of the tickets that we receive are e-tickets from them.
Right.
They do have a problem with their system, and I don't know if it's the system or user error, but they have problems sometimes where the system jams and they're not able, they've generated the ticket and then they can't print it out to hand to a defendant. So then they end up having an unserved ticket in the system, which we have to deal with, and then they manually issue them a ticket. So I would still have to keep a large supply of paper tickets to issue manually, even if we do go to e-ticketing. But I do think that it's a great alternative because it saves a lot of time for both the police department and the court.
Processing.
With processing, it saves room because with the e-tickets, you don't have to print them out unless you actually need them. If people are just going to pay their ticket without contesting it, it just exists virtually, and there's not actual paper that has to be held onto and filed. It's just stored electronically in the computer systems.
Yeah, because I was wondering, because even some stores, when you make a purchase, I think at the Apple store in the mall, my son was telling me, they make a purchase, they just send you a receipt to your email, kind of a deal. And I don't know that if we ever got that far, they wouldn't even have to print out the ticket. They could forward it to, you know.
Literally right now, if a state trooper pulls you over and gives you an e-ticket, you can sit there right at the side of the road, you go online with your cell phone and pay that ticket because
Just right there.
you know, all the payable motor vehicle tickets, you can go to the state website and pay, and it's taken care of immediately.
I remember I've stopped by your office a few times in the past, and some of the officers would come in with their handful of tickets that then you guys all have to go through and read them and enter them into the system. And I'm just thinking it would just be such a huge time saver.
Yes, it is.
And the cost of implementing the system, I would think in terms of man hours, and it would be an incredible savings, but obviously you're looking into it, and right now that's not doable.
Well, we didn't think it was doable for this year's budget, but we're
Yeah.
certainly looking into it.
How much are you talking about?
It's
You know what?
extensive.
I don't have those
Yeah, those numbers
figures
right
in
there.
front of me, I'm sorry.
It would be interesting to find out if implementing it with another town or going onto the county system ultimately would be going on the county system would be fantastic to.
Well, I've talked to a couple court administrators, and I'm interested to see if the people that are doing it in-house are happier than the people who are going on the county system, if there's any difference there. But I actually thought Netcom was going to go for it. The council was considering it, and then at the last minute, they decided that they didn't want to bear the expense of it, because you have to pay for the installation of the machine into each patrol car that you have, and then you pay per ticket issued up to a certain number. And if you exceed that number, then the costs start to go down per ticket.
Yeah, you have to kind of do a whole analysis, as I'm sure Mr. Canning would. Of course, you know who I have to look to for the analysis. It's like, okay, man hours or clerk hours versus, you know, and where does it?
Yeah,
You
but
know.
but I know with the state police that we still have a number of, like I said, I'd say 50% of the tickets are still issued manually, and they've had their e-ticketing in place for
3 years? 4
At
years?
least.
Yeah.
at least.
I remember it was the first time I heard about it, I came in and the guy's like, yeah, my system wouldn't work. I had to write these all up by hand, and, you know, and I think, I don't know if you were there that day or,
not sure.
but we were teasing him, asking him if his pen ran out of ink.
Any other questions or? Nothing there. Is there any capital requests in your budget?
No.
Okay.
Is there,
Then
one last
Go ahead.
question. Is there anything that you need that you have not requested that you'd like to have besides the e-ticketing?
No, I think I pretty much covered everything. I guess I should tell you that we're fully staffed right now. We hired a replacement for the position we lost when Jennifer Gentilucci had retired after 25 years. She was hired January 1st of 2013, at January 2nd. And then Colleen Mickelson had retired in September, and we had a replacement hired for her. The replacement person that we hired in January of last year just turned in her notice yesterday. She has seen another opportunity in another court that she feels is beneficial to her, so she's going to take that. I obviously just found out about it yesterday. I've already contacted the administrative offices. We're going to post the job position, and hopefully we can get a replacement by April.
When you replace somebody, do you look for somebody who already has all the certifications, or do you also have money in the budget to send that person for the education to be certified?
Well, I do have training expenses covered. A lot of the classes that we're sending people to are given free by the state, as far as the principles of court administration go. It's just getting them back and forth to the class. Right now, Tim Quinn is being very helpful. He's provided a vehicle to me because I have Marcella and Lynn. Marcella's the individual who's leaving, going to the level 4 classes, which would make them fully accredited. And Barbara, who is our hire from September, just finished the level 1 class and began her level 2 class just today. So Tim has given us the use of a vehicle, so I can send them back and forth to Trenton and to Bridgewater, respectively, to go to their classes. So right now, I'm not bearing the expense of getting them back and forth.
Okay.
And then there are seminars and meetings, that we go to, because then there's continuing education credits. But right now, I'm the only person that requires them because I'm state certified. But after the level 4 class is over, then Lynn Alcamo-Coster will be fully accredited, and she will also have to start getting continuing education credits to keep her her accreditation. And if she would like to continue, I would encourage her to get her certification.
Do they offer online continuing education classes? Do they do it
No,
online?
they
It always
don't.
has to be in person? Because I know sometimes with the state, it is something where you have to be physically in person, and other things you can do
Yes.
with...
There's a number of ways you can do them. I have to say that that Morris County has been very helpful with that. They try to offer training locally that gives CECs to the attendees, and also the State Association and North Jersey Association. We usually have speakers. I'm going to be going to a meeting of the North Jersey Association on Friday. I'm going to get 2 credits there because we're going to have training there. And also, we used to go to Atlantic City and to the States Association's spring conference, and they were expensive to go to. And between the 2 of them, I would say maybe we got 10 credits. And I found a conference that's held down in Cape May, first week of June. It's the same cost as going to the spring conference that the state holds, and I usually get about 12 credits
Oh, good.
for the same amount of money. So it's a lot of bang for your buck. So we're looking for different ways. The North Jersey Association is now holding full-day conferences twice a year. So you usually can send someone to that, and they can get 4 to 5 credits.
Yeah.
For a small amount of money, maybe $40 to $50.
Okay, good.
Sign me up for the Cape May June conference.
Yes, that's certainly incentive to go.
And they have to, it's every year, when does it expire? Like, how often do you have to get the continuing education credits?
You're supposed to get at least 15 credits a year, but as far as the state certification goes, as long as I get my 45 credits within a 3-year time period, because that's when I have to renew, then I'm okay. That way, if something occurs where you're not able to attend enough classes and get all your credits, you have time to make it up.
I'm just asking because I know it's really interesting information. A lot of us aren't aware of all this other things that you end up going through. It's not just a matter of getting a job and punching a clock and...
No.
It's a lot involved.
The state's made a lot of changes now. It used to be that only the court administrator had to be certified, But now they've changed the laws, and now everyone that serves as either a court administrator who's not certified or a deputy court administrator must be at least accredited, which means that you have to go through at least the 4 levels of classes. And I hope that in advertising that we get people who at least are conditionally accredited,
Yeah.
because there's a time constraint on that. They must be conditionally accredited within 6 months of hire. And there's only one trainer in the whole state, so you have to send them when the
Right.
classes are available.
I appreciate your efforts in trying to get the most bang for our buck, so to speak, and getting 12 credits instead of 10. It's really important.
Well,
I
the
think it's
10
great
would be
that you
over
do
2
that.
conferences that would cost you twice
Yeah.
as much money.
That's excellent. Thank you
So-
very much. Good job.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you, you
Thank
too.
you.
Library is next, section 19.
Who's the winning Powerball lottery numbers?
Usually I get nervous when a woman in a suit serves me with something.
Good evening. My name is Beth Blakey. I'm the president of the Mount Olive Public Library Board of Trustees. I just assumed office in January, God help me. And we are here this evening to just kind of go over where we've been and where we're going in the next year. I have with me tonight Steve Bedell, who's our treasurer, and Lynn Gebhardt, who is our brand new, as of yesterday, library director.
Welcome, Lynn.
So we are very excited.
into the fire.
Yes, we're very excited for her to be joining us. Real quickly, on the accomplishments page, which is the second page, we did experience a continued reduction in our salary and benefits expenditures by a little over $40,000. In addition, we filled a part-time secretarial position and a full-time library director position without incurring the costs of an outside employment agency, which was a nice bonus for us. We experienced some insurance savings and look forward to continued insurance savings looking ahead, which we have reallocated those cost savings into additional books, periodicals, and audiovisual materials, which are much needed. That was a line item that had been cut significantly over the past couple of years. In addition, we are increasing our building maintenance and capital improvements line to address areas which are in much need of improvement. While I'm on that, I do want to take a moment to recognize Tim Quinn's office. It's been obviously an extraordinarily difficult year in terms of weather, and the library really does appreciate all that Tim Quinn's office was able to do in helping us to minimize the risk and to make sure that our environment was a safe environment for our patrons, staff, and everybody who uses the library. So thank you for that. Library usage, visitations were down 3.6% to nearly 114,000 visits. We did have quite a number of closures due to weather and other issues last year, so we attribute some of our visitation numbers to those closures. The circulation of our materials was 143,000 transactions out. We did have a wonderful Fall Fest experience. We estimate approximately 2,500 attendees. The proceeds of that event went to purchase new iPads for the children's section of the library, which have been incredible. You saw, I apologize for the interruption of my own children earlier, but they are very grateful for that addition to the children's department. And it was wonderful to partner on Fall Fest with the Township Recreation Department in conjunction with the Tour de Mount Olive and the whole Fall in Love with Mount Olive weekend.
The
So
Fall Fest is phenomenal.
Thank
That's
you.
such
It's a
great
lot of fun.
idea. I went 2 years in a row. It's
yeah,
great.
And we hope to continue to grow it. Actually, Lynn has quite a background in events management, and I think she will work very hard to make sure that it continues to grow. We also saw a continued strong demand in computer usage and in the circulation of our non-print materials. I would like to take a moment to turn it over to Lynn just to give her an opportunity to introduce herself and to give a little bit of her vision on where we will be going next year.
Thank you. My name is Lynn Gephardt, as Beth had said. I am 15 years in the library business. I began as a children's librarian, which I think is great experience for anyone who wants to be a director. I started as Sparta Library, and then I was a branch librarian at the Sussex County Library System, the Dennis Library in Newton. And then I saw the opportunity for Mount Olive, and I have been so impressed, even just in the last 2 days, of the positive spirit and attitude of everyone that I've come in contact with. I was here at the township building this morning and working on some paperwork, and just such a helpful spirit, so I very much appreciate that. Very passionate about library service. I do not believe that library is dead. I believe that we're growing and changing and still transforming lives. So that's what I am hoping to do, and to work hard for this community and for everyone involved.
I have to say, Joe,
Yes.
I first found out that you were coming on board. I actually got a message from a mutual friend on Facebook. Guess what?
You did?
And they were so, yeah, Tim Kelly sent me, he goes, you are going to be so excited. She's great. And I was like, I can't wait to meet her. So I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad that you're
Very
here. I was
excited.
going to actually stop by on Friday and introduce myself because he let me know exactly when you were starting. So he was thrilled. So welcome. We're
Thank you.
very happy to have you.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
And at this point, we'll turn it over to Steve to talk numbers.
I'll just run through with you the budget, the figures. We are not looking for any capital infusions from the town besides our 1/3 mill. We appreciate it, and we continue to. But on the next page for the current financial status, last year the actual budget was $1,062,000. For 2014, our 1/3 mill was $1,030,000. We threw in some additional library generated revenues. We're about $1,068,000 for this year. We currently have about $157,000 in our operating reserve fund, of which some of that funds are allocated towards capital improvement. And in addition to the $3,600 below is already inclusive in that 157. Those were some grants we had from some residents. They wanted that money to be spent on certain programs. So, but right now, we look to be in pretty good shape. I'm happy to say our budget last year, for this year, was not too far off from the year before. So going through the budget was a lot easier this past year or two than it was the years prior, as you probably noticed with your own budget. The next page, funding and budget levels for 2009 through 2014. Bookkeeper missed a couple of things I just want to point out. On the very bottom, you'll see 3 columns of numbers. The first one is the operating budget that has the $1,292,000. The second column is salary and benefits, and the third column is books and materials. I think you forgot to label a couple of things. But just want to point out, at the high, the 1/3 of the mill was $1,292,000. The 1/3 of the mill for 2014 actually shows at $1,068,000. It should be $1,030,000. So the 1/3 of the mill for the library is down $262,000 over the last 4 or 5 years. That said, we've reduced staff, we've reduced costs of the library to keep everything in line. Next column over, salary and benefits, you'll see that we've reduced salary and benefits to the tune of around $203,000 over the last 5 years. Books and materials, that has fallen. We've increased it nicely from last year, but at the high it was around $127,000. This year we anticipate it to be about $85,000 for books and materials. And then on the very last page, it just has a comparison between our budget for 2013, our budget 2014. I'm not going to bore you with every line. You guys have better stuff to do, but if you want to take a quick look at it and ask any questions.
Your reduction in salary, $40,000, how was that accomplished?
Well, part of it is we had our library director left basically December 1st of last year. The new director came on essentially yesterday. So part of it, it's just kind of more of a numbers game. We didn't have to pay a director's salary for the last 2 months, so that's reflective in here. Next year, we have a director, so we'll have a full 12 months of salary of director. This year, we only have 10 months of a director's salary. So that's part of it. Another part of it is we have a administrative assistant who left last year. We replaced that assistant with somebody else at a lesser cost. And I think we had, Bernice?
Correct.
We had an employee left, I think it was beginning or middle part of last year, and we just have not replaced. And that kind of sums it up for you.
And that, not rehiring that individual, had that diminished the services at all?
No.
No, at this point, we haven't had any issues.
So there's no anticipation of replacing that person?
At this point, there is not, no.
On your insurance savings, how do you, you say that you see continued savings. How do you plan to accomplish that?
You know, we worked with the town back in late November regarding the JIF premium, just had to modify some calculations. It turned into a savings for the library.
So there's not going, your insurance is not going to go up due to the recent damage to the library?
You know, that may remain to be seen, but I don't believe so.
Here's what happened, Alex. It was brought to our attention by the library board that they believed they were picking up an inordinate share of the insurance premium on behalf of the town in the way that their share was calculated. After having taken a look at the issue and looking at what they might have gone out on the private market to get, albeit we believe to be lesser insurance, we came to an agreement with the library board for a progressive decrease in terms of their insurance costs, getting them down to a level that we felt, both of us felt, was acceptable.
And how many years is that going to?
It's over a
2017.
three-year period to bring them down to, I forget what the exact number is, which means that the insurance costs which were attributed to the library are now going to be picked up. The decrease is going to be picked up by the township. So it was our way of helping the library become more able to use their allocated funds for purposes of library services rather than to cover the costs associated with being in business. We felt that it was, we worked very, very hard with the library board to reach this agreement, and we felt that it was a fair compromise at the end of the day. So they're going to see a decrease in their insurance costs over the next 3 years, and then we'll reevaluate where we are at that point in time. But it was certainly everyone was working to try and come to a resolution which was in the best interest of everybody, and we reached that decision, and we're fairly satisfied with the result.
And it was much appreciated by the library as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that was resolved. And then on your library visitations, you were down 3.6%. How is that trending? Is this an anomaly?
You know, it's, you know, I wish I could tell you exactly, but, you know, I guess with the year 2008, 2009, when the economy took a turn for the worse, you know, our visitations shot up dramatically. So is it fair to say with the economy turning around for the better, you know, people may have gone elsewhere or maybe may have vacationed more? That's the only anecdotal answer I could give you. To sit here and give you the exact, couldn't do it.
I think Lynn could probably speak pretty well to that, though, in terms of how people are using technology and maybe not walking through the door of the library, but still utilizing services.
Things are changing in how we count statistics at the library. One of my goals is to increase digital subscriptions, such as Zinio, which is an online magazine subscription to offer to patrons, Freegal, which is a way to download 3 songs through the library. And so you would count those as circulations. You're meeting people where they are, and let's face it, people are online. We still have people coming into the library. People are out of jobs, and they're looking for jobs at the library using our computers. Some people still don't have computers or internet at home, so they are coming in. There are children who are looking for story times, and those are things that you're seeing. But what about the people that are outside the library that are still using library services? How many people access your catalog from home? How many people are looking at your homepage? Those are things that we would begin to count.
Now, is there any, I recognize that you just came on board.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you may wish to do that can't be done because of the constraints in the current budget?
I feel a little unprepared to answer that question. But I believe that the current budget will allow me to do what I need to do this year, but perhaps next year when we revisit it.
Thank you.
And I just want to point out that we ran a conservative budget. So, I'll just point out on the top of the last page, for our library generated income, we took it down by, about $12,000, which is a decent amount percentage terms. And one issue is we just have to renegotiate a contract with Netcong. But as you all know, we had fire sprinkler head popped. We had a lot of water damage. So the entire adult wing has been closed since essentially January 4th. So we anticipate there may be a loss of some revenue there. There's less books going out, potentially maybe less fines and fees, maybe less people going to the coffee bar. But you know what? I guess we'll know that number for sure as the year progresses. But you know what? I think we have plenty of room that if we need to allocate some other funds, we can always, kind of fine tune, take some other money out of some other departments and reallocate it.
We wanted to just, because we're videotaped now, we keep talking about a third of a mil, and just for everyone, if you want to explain where the third of a mil, how it's calculated, the formula, or Sherry?
Yeah, we're the receiver, so I don't even want to go there.
Just how the third of a mil, what is it based on?
They use I believe it's the equalized tax rate, Colleen, is what they use to calculate the third of a mil.
And that's regulated by the state. That's because it's a public library? Is that how
It's the way the library was set up by ordinance.
by
I don't think
ordinance?
it's by fair.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, Fred can answer. Fred, from the state, that's the guidelines for the state?
Well, it's consistent with the state guidelines.
Mhm.
Council always has the option of changing that funding mechanism also by taking over the library. It's not something that I suggest because they do such an excellent job.
But when you do something like that, then they lose a lot of other services across the board that you benefit from overall.
Not if you fund them at a level which is higher than a third of a mil. I mean,
Yeah.
it all comes down to how much funding is going to be provided by. This way, they can budget. They know what their funding level is going to be. If it were a council-run organization, I mean, it would be at the will and whim of the municipality and of the economy. So
Yeah.
it's a far better system, I think, that we
Yep.
have in place now.
Absolutely.
I'm sure the people who run the library spend all of that volunteer time, and I do thank you both for your efforts. It's not something which goes unnoticed, although it probably goes unsaid, that the amount of time that you guys put in is very much appreciated, as is everyone's time up here.
Sure.
Obviously, we all. But you guys do a great job. I know that if you had more money, I'm sure that that's why I kind of cringed when Alex asked the question in terms of whether or not you have the money to do the things that you want to do. And I'm sure the answer to that, if you really gave it some thought, is if you give us more money, we'll find excellent programs to provide on behalf of the township.
That's not the reality, though. So
It's right, it's
Yeah.
not the reality,
You know.
and we recognize that, and we're happy to be, I was happy to be able to come to that compromise with you guys and to get a little bit extra money to give you a little leeway to continue to do the things that you do. And, the service that you guys provide is an excellent service. It's needed by a segment of the community.
Sure.
And, we have I think one of the best municipal libraries in the county, so kudos to you guys.
Thank you very much.
And as our revenue streams increase, more businesses come to town?
We'll still be giving you a third of the
That's all right. You know what? No, besides that, I just want to thank everybody's help. We went through a little bit of craziness the first couple of weeks of the year with the library closed on the water. But I just want to point out, John Geiger was a super, super help, was there every morning and the afternoon. So I just want to point out, I know he's not here, but just want to at least get his name on the record as being a tremendous help to us and the cleanup crew. So I just want to get that on record.
One last quick question. When you talked about the online and visitors that way, we're not counting those visits now as usage?
Currently, I don't believe so. I'll be doing the state report actually starting tomorrow, so I'm going to take a look and see how things are counted.
Yeah, because I know there are a lot of options on the Mount Olive Public Library website, and that people do use resources that way. And I know I've used them a few times, and I didn't have to go to the library to utilize those programs. So I would think that it should be counted as a visit.
I agree. It's a more progressive movement in libraries. The state does not have a set way to count your statistics, but more libraries who are seeing that kind of thing, where you have a lot of people using your online services.
Yeah, there's a
Why
lot.
not count them? They're still circulation. They're still being used, and they should be counted. So.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank
luck.
you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right. We have 10 resolutions, I believe. Any questions on the resolutions? Mr. Roman?
On the resolution rejecting the bid for the Mount Playmore, Sean, could you expound on that?
Sure. In our initial estimations for budget, what we went out to bid for at this point was for a labor or construction crew to assist our own DPW, and this is the actual, once the concrete's poured, the actual assembly of the playground itself under the guidance of Leathers Associates. Now, I don't want to divulge in a public meeting the number we had estimated as to what an acceptable response would be, but the bids you see before you, I believe the low one was $73,000. I'm actually very happy about this, and I'll tell you why. Because the New Jersey local public contract law is very constricting when it comes sometimes to common sense getting a service. I'll give you an example. In this one, since this is the second time that we've rejected bids, it's because in this case, our internal estimations, this price exceeds what we had figured we'd pay. I'm now free to go out and negotiate as long as they're the same parameters. And I am happy to report that I have some very promising responses on the negotiations based on the same scope of work to the tune of, I'd estimate almost up to 30 to 40% reduction from the lowest bid. So it's going to be a money savings in the end for the township. It's just the use of the local public contract law. You got to be patient. You got to go through the tenets that's prescribed, and that's why this is on for rejection tonight. The responses, even though they're somewhat in the ballpark, are still not acceptable to us, and we want to keep this thing, in budget.
Now, will this in no way delay the construction of the?
This hasn't. The weather has. This winter's absolutely been devastating to us. We put off our initial date originally from March 3rd to late March to right now. We're looking at just to be safe, late April. That will actually be the construction part. We still have to excavate and pour concrete. So that's going to, we're looking towards a late March date. So it's still going to come quick. If it gets above 32 degrees for 3 days straight, we'll be very happy.
That's all I have.
Anyone else on the resolutions? We have 2 ordinances. Any questions on the ordinances? If not, Mr. Roman?
Hold on. I just briefly went through the ordinance for the clothing bin. Are we putting this? This is going to be when the general legislative code.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And does that mean that there's no mechanism by which way a business can, for lack of a better phrase, get a variance?
Right. At this point in time, that would be that's correct. Unless somebody came in for what I would term to be a use variance, I couldn't see any other way. That would be a real extreme case. And we conferred with Chuck McGordy before we did this to see his thoughts about it as well and his input. And this was the consensus as to how to proceed. There's no perfect way to address this and legislate. So this is, under the circumstances, the best way we feel is available.
So so a hypothetical, if, say, Walmart wanted to put clothing bins on their own property, they would not be allowed to do so.
Generally speaking, that would be correct.
One question I had also too, Red, it was we had discussed something at one point. What if this excludes all the, like churches as well
I was
too?
gonna ask the same
If
thing.
they want to put one on their property for a fundraiser, they have to put it on township property? They can't be any kind of a exemption or something for a church or?
Yeah,
I
they,
don't know how.
the only exceptions would be if a nonprofit organization wanted to put it on the
that's
locations
Okay,
identified.
so it's that-
That's
okay.
it, yeah.
Okay, so they can't do it on their own, would have to be here. Okay. Mr. Lowe?
That's one thing that I do have when I read this when we got it the other day, and I was just like, I have a problem with it only because I do know that a lot of the churches do the fundraising, and also like down at the Methodist Church in Old Flanders on Park Place, they have their thrift shop and people drop off the clothes after they have their things. So, I mean, and that's a huge part of their fundraising mechanism. So I would have to say that I would like to see the ordinance with a component that, like the churches and that type would be included instead of municipal property, because otherwise we're gonna be having, when I think about on the weekend, at just the Methodist Church, their thrift shop right there, I mean, there are bags and bags and bags of clothes on Saturday. I mean, it's like tons of stuff. I don't know that we necessarily want that on municipal property, and then they have to come and get it and bring it down to their facility and transport it. I think we maybe need to expand a little bit on the locations to include. I mean, that's only
we're concerned
going on
with
based
the
on
churches and all that.
experience. I see what's going on. I just don't know that we want to have that on municipal property.
Mr. Rowe?
Yeah, I mean, I think this ordinance goes way farther than what we were initially attempting to resolve. Remember, originally it was the proliferation of clothing bins, and if I recall the number being 18 throughout the township. And some of them were being placed on properties where the owners were not even known or seemed to have not have given permission. Now, if the purpose is to address that issue, I mean, there's I'm pretty sure different ways we can go about, through the same zoning process, add something to the zoning because the clothing bins are temporary structures. We already have something in place to control the use of temporary structures, and if without singling one person out, on 46 to Ken's Barns, the one that's like right in the middle of the way definitely does not look like it is in within setbacks or anything like that. So I mean, I'd be more inclined to seeing something put into zoning to address that issue that way.
Without this ordinance, can I drop one in my driveway?
Depends.
I assume I can, because I
Yeah.
can put a garbage dumpster in my driveway.
Yeah, at this point, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
I thought he was doing fundraising.
I mean, you have to, the other side of this is you're weighing this against the aesthetics of the township, because, these become, when they're not maintained properly, they become eyesores, and they affect the businesses around them, and they're not often owned by the organization that's monitoring them, and there's I'm just saying that's the things we're trying to temper against this. We did speak to Chuck about the fact that perhaps we would want to put this in the zoning code, because then at least if someone wants to come forward, make an application, I mean, it's be costly. The next thing you'll have is people saying it costs an awful lot to get this answer. But they'd have to come forward with essentially a site plan for an accessory type of structure, and then there'd be conditions on how to maintain it. But at that point, it becomes really almost cost prohibitive. But I just want you to know, some of the thought that went into this, and some of the things we're up against. And as I said, on the other side, I think the reason why this discussion came up is because they're simply very difficult to maintain and to keep the aesthetics of the township and the surrounding neighbors. So you have those issues to deal with.
Is there any way to include I don't know the laws, but when it comes to allowing it on a nonprofit property, if there's a church, I mean, it could be any nonprofit if there's a property, not just any property. But the churches, the thrift shop, that's a nonprofit per se.
It's something we can look at. If you say a municipal property, it's because then there's some type of public objective and public good. But that's something we would have to look at, and that could be, once you say one nonprofit, it could be any nonprofit. So, Fred and Jeff could have a nonprofit and suddenly have, clothing bins.
Yeah.
You may not be too happy.
That's true.
That's the thing, so.
Mr. Mayor, did you have some?
Yeah, I mean, I said my piece at the last meeting on this. I obviously differ with the number of people sitting up here on council. I think this is absolutely necessary. It's been identified by our planning and zoning department as a problem which needs to be addressed. I don't really understand most of the concerns which have been raised up here about fundraising, and there are plenty of ways to fundraise, and the Methodist Church doesn't even use a clothing bin. They just have a straight drop-off. Right. And so I just don't understand the reluctance of moving forward with this ordinance as it is currently drafted. But, it's not my decision at this point. If you guys decide not to draft an ordinance, then we'll continue to have a proliferation of clothing bins. You can certainly come up with a different solution that you may think is better. I certainly say that any type of solution that you guys come up with is better than what we have now. Although I strongly suggest that you adopt the current ordinance because it's a bad situation which is only going to get worse with that action by this council.
Mr. Roman?
Fred, going on to the example that the mayor had given about if he's allowed to put a clothing bin on his property, do we have currently, and that would be a temporary structure, and I assume that we can, homeowner can currently, or any business can put a temporary structure for an unlimited period of time. Is that correct?
I don't know about unlimited. We have things like the pods and things like that, so. But I think the point of that question is, with respect to clothing bins, we really don't have any regulations or guidelines. So somebody could push the envelope and in fact put them, from someone's perspective anywhere until we address this.
So then why not allow a commercial entity to put a clothing bin, but we just put restrictions as to location, place, setbacks?
Well, you could do that if you so choose. You could. And I think, as the mayor said, it still would be better than where you are right now, but it may not address overall what the maintenance is going to be and the follow-up and monitoring of these things.
For what purpose, too? To allow that business to get into the fundraising business? For what purpose does it serve to allow any particular business to put these on their property? They're an eyesore, and there's a proliferation of them, and unless you strictly, in my opinion, set forth an ordinance which limits the ability to put them throughout the town, you're going to continue to have the same problem that's been identified. I'm sorry, I wasn't finished, Alex. I recognize, and I know I cut people off too, so I really apologize. And I don't mean this in you and I have had this discussion too, that we just don't see eye to eye on this issue, which is fine. But, I mean, the bottom line is that this whole concept of allowing these entities to fundraise, I don't get it. There are plenty of ways to fundraise. They could fundraise on municipal property by dropping a box, moving forward with the fire department and saying, you know what, is it okay if we can drop a box and try and raise some money there? I think the solution which has been set forth is easily monitored and enforced, and it really will stop the problem that we've identified. There's nothing more that I could say that I haven't already said. I feel very strongly.
Well, one thing you
about
might, Mayor, if I could just add, is that the few that perhaps the governing body is talking about trying to save are going to be at the expense of, you're going to have the risk that everybody else is still going to have them. And I think that might be one of the points here. It may seem like, on the surface, a concerning, decision or drastic to say, let's put an end to it. But if you don't go in this direction, you really run the risk that all the other entities that you haven't mentioned are still going to do this and participate, and the aesthetic and the eyesores are going to continue. And we are giving away, or providing a way that these organizations can participate if they'd like.
And we're still allowing them, if I heard correctly then, like the Presbyterian Church, they can still do a drop of their own. As long
Right.
as there's no box on the place, they can say, drop it at my door, and it's fine. That's really what I,
That's
maybe
what
I
I-
was getting confused with, is thinking they couldn't even drop that.
Right.
But as long as there's no structure there, they're still allowed to do a fundraiser on their own and say, drop it off at our building.
Mhm.
That's fine, okay. Then that clears it up for me, because that's what I was concerned with. Yes, Colleen?
That was my question. If they can still do that, that's
Yeah.
good. We don't interfere with that. And like the Boy Scouts over at St. Jude's, it's usually a dumpster that they have sitting there in the parking lot. They can still do that. So we eliminate
It's their
the,
own.
I know, it's, that's how it usually, but it's only for a 2-week period and it's
Yeah.
a fundraiser. So this eliminates all those boxes, which I agree, I don't want
Yeah.
to see those all over town, and all of the garbage that's piled up outside, because it's not, they're not kept.
Right.
That's the
Nice, so,
problem.
That's exactly
all
right.
right, so we don't hinder the fundraising capabilities of who's already doing their fundraising, and we eliminate the boxes being dropped off willy-nilly all over town. Okay, I'm fine with it.
That's fine.
And just so I'm clear, I'm not protecting the entities that actually profit the most from these bins. I am more concerned about a property owner, be it commercial or nonprofit, that wishes to use this as a vehicle by which they can augment their income. I am buying, if a business wants to do that, who am I to get in the way? I think the biggest problem that we have is when bins are being placed on properties that there's nobody there actually monitoring the property. And if there's an issue of the refuse being located outside, I mean, I believe that should automatically be addressed with our property maintenance codes as it is. You know, littering, for one, comes to mind. But I've said my piece on this ordinance. I will be voting against it the way it's drafted.
Any other, okay. Any old business? Seeing none, any new business? Mr. Roman?
This past Thursday, I attended a joint session of the Planning Board, Environmental and Open Space Commission, in which there was a brief presentation of the Highlands redevelopment zone that we're creating along Route 46, which allows for one of the things that it allows is the ability for us to finally have a boardwalk along Route 46. Now that Highlands restrictions appear to be diminished extensively. I believe in the mayor's budget there is improvements for Flanders Park, and I'd like for us to move those improvements slated for Flanders Park and gear them towards the implementation and future construction of a boardwalk along Route 46. And I would request that the administration reach out to Gene and his firm to start getting together cost estimates on what something along that lines would cost. And I'm looking for council support to move that budget item that the mayor has in his capital for that purpose.
Questions, objections? What's the amount?
I can tell you, I had this discussion with Alex last night when he raised it with me about the boardwalk, and I had indicated to him, we were looking at a way of funding the cost study. I had put in my budget in capital a $50,000 down payment towards improvements at Flanders Park, not knowing whether or not I was actually going to move forward or ask the council to fund actual improvements. Gives us $1 million worth of bonding capacity. If the council is more inclined to move forward with the boardwalk project, then it is, I believe, appropriate at this point in time, as I told Alex last night, to move that money and start looking at the cost of the boardwalk. And we'll put off the improvements or looking at improvements to Flanders Park. Or perhaps you take a portion of the money. It's a down payment. Ultimately, if we didn't use it, it would lapse back into surplus anyway. It just gave us a little bit of leeway in terms of where we were with the budget moving forward. So I have no problem if that's what the council decides to do. And perhaps the best thing to do is to move it into a new category, not necessarily related to to boardwalk project itself, but to include the boardwalk project as a possible use with that down payment for capital improvements. And that way the council would then have the leeway. And I would certainly defer to Sherry in terms of coming up with the appropriate category for, we may need some additional monies for some small amount of money that we haven't already appropriated for Mount Playmore, to use it generally for improvements throughout the township. And then it would be at the council's discretion as to how to use that money or not use that money at all. So it gives us a little bit of leeway.
Yep, I'm in favor of that as well, because anything to try and improve the lake area in any capacity, I think, is what most people keep asking over and over. So I agree with you, Alice. Kelly?
I have a question for Fred. In terms of putting in a boardwalk at the lake, in the past discussions, because of the way the deeds were written, there are properties, now depending on where you're going to put the board, which I want to just state that I would love to have a boardwalk at the lake. If we could possibly do it, that'd be fantastic. But there are like properties like across from the lake, further up, like on Clasine or those areas, where in their deed they have lake, they own part of the lake, a section basically where they could put a buoy and they could put a boat out there. So how hard would it be to find out who has ownership of those parts of the lake? Because I know, just to do some research with some properties along the lake, it's like almost impossible to find out where the lake part actually, the people actually own it. So that's where I would be concerned before we expended funds in that. Maybe we should find out how many, we'd probably have to ask Jack, how many properties are we looking at that actually own part of the lake, was deeded in, and some of these property owners aren't even aware that they own that part of the lake, but I think we'd have to probably vacate that to some degree.
I thought Alex was referring to the portion of the lake that's along Route 46.
But there are sections along Route 46 that, as I understand, there are some properties that may have
Well,
deeded lake
you know,
rights entering
worst
that.
case scenario is we can look at the tax maps, we could pull the deeds and to see if there's any
Just
kind of
to see.
underlying restrictions. But I would think in that location, I would think that's highly improbable. I
Well,
would think
that's in the
they,
Hackettstown redevelopment zone, and if I recall, looking at the map, Cleesine is not included.
I'm just using that as an.
I think it's further
Yeah,
east.
yeah, I'm just using that as an example because in living in Bud Lake area, and people talk about it, they'll say that they know when they have deeded rights to the lake and they can actually put a buoy out and have their boat, and it's like spotted all over the place, and it may not be in that specific location,
We
but.
can always eminent domain.
Hey, wait a minute, you're the one who is so dead set against eminent domain, and you
For
want to.
boardwalk, I'll take somebody's sand.
Lake privileges, and I'm just bringing that up only
but
because.
we can take a look at it.
Yeah,
I
just-
can ask the administration.
And we could look at a couple
we
of them,
could-
and I'm
we
only
can take a
bringing it
look.
up only
Yeah.
because.
I would
have
hope,
seen
just so that, at this point, I think the starting point would be, it shouldn't be a problem. But that-
Exactly.
I don't want to, set it out there that that it's going to be an issue, but we'll give you the level of comfort that it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully it's not in those deeds as they've passed over the years, people have relinquished that, but there are some people who, yes, to this day, still here. We own a part of the lake, it's in our deed, okay? Yeah, go 10 feet out from the corner of, and that's where my spot is, you just don't know, so.
Well, yeah, we have to start the process at least by moving monies so that
right.
we can at least
I think
get
that's
the
great.
engineering and get cost estimates.
Absolutely fantastic, thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm assuming there's support for this?
Yeah, I
Yes.
guess we have
Yeah, I
everybody's
think
in
it's
support
great.
of it?
It's a beautiful thing, wonderful.
Yep. Okay, any other new business? If not, public portion, anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none, could we have an adjourn to the
So moved.
public meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, let me grab this sheet here a minute. This is the one we're using, right? Okay. Nah, I don't have to, right? Okay, I'd like to call the Mount Olive Township Council meeting, public meeting to session. Michelle, can you read the Open Publics Meeting Act?
According to the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been given to the Daily Record. Notice has been posted in the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, and notices were sent to those requesting the same.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda.
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante.
Here.
Mrs. Laybow.
Here.
Mr. Perkins. Mr. Roman.
Here.
Mr. Nicastro.
Here.
Mr. Mania.
Okay, please note Mr. Maney is on vacation and Mr. Perkins is out sick. We have approval of minutes from the last meeting, Mr. Amianda, from the workshop and public meeting for February 11, 2014.
Yes. I make a motion for approval of minutes of previous meetings on February 11, 2014.
Second?
Oh, I have to switch that.
Well, no. Did we have a second on this?
February 11th.
She just read it. I think.
Oh, okay, we'll go back to that.
Yeah.
should
We can go back
after
to it
this,
then.
right? Okay, yeah. Okay, you have a second, right?
Yeah.
Was there a second?
Roll call?
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes. Going back to the resolution to recognizing retirement of Colleen Zarek.
Zarek.
We need a motion and a second on that, please, to accept it.
Make a motion to approve the resolution for Ms. Zarek.
Second?
Roll call?
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Perkins? Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes.
Mr. Mania?
And the resolution honoring Debbie Potter will be continued to another meeting. Correspondence. We have multiple correspondence. 14 of them. Any questions or anything on the correspondence? Seeing none, we have 2 ordinances for first reading. We have, let's see, get that one here. Item, let me see, ordinance number 5-2014, ordinance of the Township Council of Township of Mount Olive and the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, regulating the placement and use of clothing donation bins. Mr. Ferrante.
Sure, I move that ordinance number 5-2014 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 11th, 2014, at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of a second reading, and a passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second?
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
No.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes. Ordinance number 6-20-14, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Mount Olive and the County of Morris, State of New Jersey, establishing regulations for ice retardant systems within the Township of Mount Olive. Ms. LeBeau?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move that ordinance number 6-2014 be introduced by title and passed on first reading, and that a meeting be held on March 11th, 2014, at 7 p.m. at the Municipal Building, 204 Flanders Drakestown Road, Bud Lake, New Jersey, for a public hearing, consideration of second reading, and passage of said ordinance, and that the clerk be directed to publish, post, and make available said ordinance in accordance with the requirements of the law.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nicastro?
Yes. The consent resolutions, we have 10 resolutions. Does anyone wish to have any move to non-consent?
I'm assuming we have 7,
We have,
3 through 10.
Right.
oh, correct.
So it's,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah, technically, it's
8.
Or
8 of them. Mr. Roman, would you move the consent resolutions?
I move for approval of resolutions 3 through 10.
Second.
Anyone from the public wish to be heard on that? No. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amianda?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. Consent motions, the bill list, Mr. Roman?
I move the approval of the bill list.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Amianda? Mr. Ferrante?
Yes.
Mrs. Laybow?
Yes.
Mr. Roman?
Yes.
Mr. Nacastro?
Yes. On to reports, administrative reports.
If I may,
Mr. Mayor?
this weekend, cabin fever reliever. How many of you made it there?
I was there.
Saw Joe there. Tremendous turnout.
Huge.
Place was packed from the minute it opened to the minute it closed. People were still coming 15 minutes before, and everyone looked like they're having a great time. Pie Day is our next event, and you can look for many eating establishments that will be participating. Visit the township website, click on recreation, and you'll see continuous updates in terms of what restaurants are participating and what their menus will be for Pie Day. Very excited about the next announcement, which is the 5K Do or Die Color Run, which will be held April 26th at Turkey Brook Park. Registration for that event is now open. If any of you have ever done a color event, you end up looking, when you're done, like a rainbow. Recreation has made the determination that the events that work the best are those that include entire families. And so we're focusing on those types of events moving forward. This is one of those events which will be open to kids, and they're going to have a great time. If any of you had the chance to go to the Mud Run last year and saw how families participated and how successful that event was, this is the next in the step of successful events. So I encourage everyone to participate in that event, whether it's walking, running, or being one of the people that's going to end up throwing the colors. Very excited about the next announcement, which is this weekend is the Mid-Atlantic Region First Robotics Competition. That's right. And that's hosted by the Mount Olive Robotics team. It's March 1 and 2 from 9 to 4 at the Mount Olive High School. Admission is free. If none of you have ever been to a robotics event, let me explain how it's operated. Each school has built a robot consistent with a set of rules to play a particular game. This year's game involves one of those big exercise balls, and you score points by passing it from one team on your alliance to another. There are 3 teams on the Red Alliance, 3 teams on the Blue Alliance that are randomly put together per match, and ultimately Mount Olive is recognized as having one of the oldest and one of the most prestigious robotics programs in the country. I can tell you, and I'm very proud of my son who has participated in robotics. He ended up getting a very large scholarship from the University of Rochester yesterday for his participation in the robotics program. And many colleges do offer robotics scholarships for having participated in the organization, which is called FIRST. I can't tell you what the F, the I, and the R, and the S stand for. I know the T is for technology, but it is nationally known, internationally known, and it is a competition which ultimately leads to a national, international competition at the end, which has been held in St. Louis, Missouri for the last few years. I can tell you that this year, the Mount Olive Robotics program is actually traveling to Hawaii to participate in a regional event in Hawaii, so my son is very excited about that as well. I tried to get in as a chaperone, but unfortunately I was a little late. Following up on that, the following weekend, Mount Olive is hosting the Lego robotics program, which is called FLL, and that's another event which, if you can make it, is exceptional. It's actually run for the 7th and 8th grade, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, and it is the precursor to the robotics program. And Mount Olive has held the competition for a number of years. It's a big fundraiser for the Mount Olive Robotics Club, and to see what these kids in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are able to put together with Legos, and to play a game which has been put together for them is really quite a treat.
What date was that, Mayor? Did you?
That's the following weekend, which would be the 8th and 9th
8th
of
and 9th.
March. And that again is at Mount Olive High School. This weekend also, Mount Olive Lions Club is hosting their pancake breakfast at Applebee's, March 1, 8 to 10 a.m. It's a great fundraiser for the Lions Club. If you can at all make it to eat some pancakes, bring your family, they would really appreciate it. Weiss's grand opening is this Sunday, 10:30 a.m. If you can all make it, all of the higher ups at Weiss are supposed to be there this weekend, and it would be great for the township if we could get a large outpouring of our elected and municipal officials to be there. Just seeing if I missed anything. I don't think that I did. I just would like to thank Lisa Pignataro, who does a great job in terms of preparing me for this weekend to educate you all on things which are happening in town. So thank you very much, Lisa Pignataro.
Thank you. On to, old business. Any old business? Any new business? Seeing none. Legal matters.
Thank you, Mr. Nicastro. Just briefly, the township, really through the planning board, was in court where ARD Development had challenged the denial by the planning board of an extension of time for their Phase 2 development. The case was heard last week before Judge Weisenbeck. We're waiting for a decision. Our office really didn't participate in this aspect of the litigation. There's no sense to have, both the planning board attorney and our office submit briefs, but we did appear in court to hear the arguments, and I'll be able to brief the governing body at the next meeting, and we'll also hopefully have a decision by the court at such time. And we're also in the process of wrapping up and presenting to you the developers agreement for Fratelli. There's just a few minor issues that we hope to have resolved, and we'll bring to you at the next meeting. And unless there's any other questions, that's my report. Mayor?
I'm not sure that everyone sitting up here on council knows what ARD is.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a long, torturous history. I think maybe I'd be better off to send a nice summary of the history, because it dates back.
Basically, it's Morris Chase Phase 2.
It is, correct. And it spans back, I would say, over...
1989.
Yeah, I was going to say over 20 years of various litigation and phases of this project. And, well, one portion has gone forward, Phase 1. Phase 2 remains, and Phase 2 has a number of environmental issues and hurdles to overcome, and it's taken its time in the approval process, to say the least. And without giving the full history at this point, you name it, this has, unlike other developments that have gone forward and been completed and been completed in very good form, this has had quite a history. And I think it might be a good idea, because it's outlived most of us, if I prepared a short summary so you're all aware of what those issues are and what they've been. I mean, just to give you just a brief update, they even went and actually received a reversal of their Highlands disapproval or expiration of their Highlands permit over last summer. That came up at the oral argument before the Office of Administrative Law. So it's been going on for quite some time, and I think an update and a history would be helpful to everyone here. So even the mayor had some moments with them years ago, so I can remember.
Remember that?
Not that I remember.
Really?
I think they had some moments with me.
That's a better way to say it.
I just want to
You
ask
did put them in their place.
I know this
Yeah.
is probably not super important, but I thought that Phase 2 was the Marsh Chase that's being developed now, and Phase 1 was the part that it's kind of reversed the other way around?
I don't
Contradictory?
think so. No, I think
Okay.
Phase 1 is what's done in Phase
What's
2,
that?
which has been the subject of the litigation.
Yeah, I thought that was the other way around, but
Yeah.
it's still, regardless,
Yeah.
hopefully we're successful.
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that would be
Thank you.
nice.
Thank you, Mr.
We'll look forward to the
I will.
the summary.
It's a good idea.
Council reports. Mr. Amianda, anything on Board of Ed?
Yes. Board of Education held its meeting yesterday, February 24, at Mount Olive Middle School. Among actions taken by the board were, one, the board approved the boiler replacement project at Sancho School in the amount of $292,000. Number two, the board approved a roof renovation project at high school in the amount of $796,491. Number three, the board approved a roof renovation project at Tins Road School in the amount of $198.99. Number four, the board amended the 2013-2014 school calendar to conduct full instruction day on Monday, April 21st, 2014, and a shortened instruction day on Friday, June 24, 2014, to make up for the utilization of the 2 additional snow days lost. Also, June 23rd, 2014 through June 25, 2014 shall be full instruction days, while June 26, 2014 shall be a shortened instruction day. Number five, the board approved a resolution to apply for funds to support implementation of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act in the amount of $127,380 starting July 1st, 2013 and ending on June 30th, 2014. In other words, the district is doing very well as far as attracting extra grants from the State Board of Education Commission and also from the federal government. And all this, that's why they are funding improving the physical condition of the buildings. And that's the essence of the report.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor? Yeah, I understand that the Board of Education also moved graduation from June 24th to June 26th. That's what I was for high school.
Yeah, right.
Which happens to fall right now right in the middle of my golf trip.
The nerve.
Mr. Ferrante, you have Environmental, Lake, and Library Board. Any?
I don't have anything. The only thing I want to piggyback on is with the Bud Lake Association. I know they've had plans. They would definitely be in favor of having a boardwalk, and I've actually seen the blueprints. They've done research, I guess, many years ago. So they actually have blueprints of what a boardwalk and the location, and they actually have funds allocated already towards that.
From what I was told, the boardwalk concept started back in the 1960s.
Way back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's overdue. But and thankfully this redevelopment zone will remove tremendous state hurdles.
Ms. Laveau, Senior Citizens, Economic, and TNR.
Senior Citizen meets on Tuesday, which I'm planning on being there for their, they have their business meeting, the first one of the month, the third week, they have their social. And I missed the EDC meeting last night. I was working. Were you there?
Yes.
And can you report for me on that?
I believe that I got there a little bit late, and the mayor was there as well, but I believe DECA was there with their students, and Jeff Stadelman was giving a recap and going over everything and engaged them to become involved with us.
Wonderful.
As far as marketing and different programs along that nature, and basically that was the discussion was basically a lot of that. Mr. Mayor? Yeah, we've decided to actually bring DECA into our EDC. We thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, excellent.
So Tim Kelly brought 4 members of the DECA group, and they're going to be looking at some of the information that we've put together in terms of marketing Mount Olive and seeing if they can improve on that. They're also looking at different concepts in terms of development of the BASF and the 57-acre municipally owned track. So we thought that overall, we thought as a group that bringing the kids, the high school kids, into a real-life marketing situation would be beneficial for them and for us.
Phenomenal.
Yes, just to let everyone know also, I'm receiving Businessman of the Year
I was
award
just
from
gonna-
DECA tomorrow at 6:30.
I was just gonna say
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very good.
I share that with all of you,
Congratulations.
Excellent.
but I'm keeping the plaque.
Anything else,
Well,
Ms. LeBeau?
As far as businessmen, I'll have to say I was at my Keller Williams. We have our sales rally once a month, and I was there this morning and got very nice comments from Foundation Title. They stopped by to visit with you and said, "Boy, he's really something else." He absolutely is. So.
I don't think something else was a compliment.
No, it was actually a compliment, very much so a compliment. And so the next part for TNR, we're still moving forward with planning our yard sale for the spring, and down to I don't want to jinx it. Let me just say the program is running very nicely right now. Every time we say we don't have too many cats, don't say that. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Roman?
I have nothing to report.
Board of Health, the meeting was last Wednesday. It was a very short, basic meeting. There was nothing urgent going on, just basic reports and all on that. I have nothing on legislative. Mr. Maney is not here. Anyone from the public wish to be heard? Seeing none. Council comments? Mr. Amianda?
Yes, I wanted to say that snowy winter is to blame for sewer blockages. This talk has been going on in town, trying to pass the buck from person to individual, but actually, the snow, winter snow is to blame. The snowfall was unusual, as you know, and overwhelming. It affected many people. In spite of the limited manpower the road department has, the public works crews did their best to keep the roads clean. Also, for your information, I tried to dig in the past. Mount Olive Township had not seen this much snow since 1978. They keep on giving you different years. I personally thank the department, the Public Works Department, for excellent work. I also thank Mount Olive residents for their patience. It is good that people come out and point out good things to us, what is good and what was not good. It is one way of improving our town. It is good to tell us what needs to be done. So in that case, I'm really very thankful to the residents for their patience as we went through this thing.
Thank you. Mr. Ferrante?
Nothing this evening.
Ms. LeBeau?
I just want to piggyback on what Daniel was talking about with the response for the township, these storms, and I have to say it's, a lot of residents, they reach out to us and they have an issue here or there, and, we get right on and talk to the administration, and either if it's Tim Quinn or Frank Wilbert Jr., and the response has been really nice. They address all of the issues that they can as quickly as they can, and it's just really great to know that at any time when the residents reach out to us, we have a great staff and team that we reach out to, and we get resolution to the issues, and I know the guys are working really hard and doing the best that they can. And I even had one resident had a concern, and as a matter of fact, a couple were going to come tonight with pictures and everything, and they had a concern. I brought it to the attention of Frank Wilbert Jr. It was resolved, and about 15 minutes, maybe an hour, he calls me up. He goes, oh my God, it's done. It's great. They did a terrific job. And right away I called him. I said, this is a thank you call. So it's nice that when the residents actually reach back out to us and say, thank you very much, and we can turn around and relay that to our staff. So I agree to 100%. It's, sure, let us know what's wrong so we can address it. And it's really fantastic to hear when people are happy with the results, and that's what kind of keeps us going. So it's always a wonderful thing. And I thank the administration for all their hard work and keeping everything running as smooth as possible in some of the really most difficult situations. Thank you.
Roman?
I have nothing.
I have nothing. Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.